Welcome to Coastside Poetry. Thanks to those of you who've zoomed in and those who are watching on YouTube. We meet either physically or virtually on the second Tuesday of every month to celebrate spoken poetry. I'm Diane Lee Moomey, and Steve Long and I are your hosts this evening. Our featured poet event is being recorded and streamed live onto YouTube as we speak. So anyone can look at it later. We'll be posting the link on our website, coastsidepoetry.org. This evening, we welcome Central Valley poet Linda Scheller. Linda is a poet, playwright, and book reviewer with two published poetry collections, Fierce Light and Wind and Children. Her work recently appeared or is forthcoming in Colorado Review, The Wild Word, Sugar House Review, Arcana, On the Seawall, Poem, and Museum of Americana. Her manuscript, Black Forest, was recently a finalist for the Barrow Street Press Book Award and the Word Works Washington Prize. And her poetry has been nominated for Best of the Net and Pushcart prizes. For more information, please visit her at lindascheller.com. And now, please welcome Linda.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you, Steve. I'm so grateful to Coastside Poetry for having me read today. It's such an honor and a pleasure. And thanks to everyone who's zooming in. I thought I'd start with about 3 poems from my first book, Fierce Light, from Future Cycle Press. It came out in 2017, and it was the result of a sort of a, challenge from one of my 5th grade students who said, girls can't do anything important, only men can. So that prompted me to do a great deal of research, and I wrote poems, persona poems in the voices of women who are, some of them very well known, and others who I had never heard of, and maybe you haven't either. And I'm going to start with a poem about, or rather in the voice of Saks Kitashima. And she was an activist who, with others, managed to secure reparations for the internment of her family and many other Japanese Americans. So this is family 21373. And Tsuyoko Saks Kitashima lived from 1918 until 2006. The wind sprays dust through the cracks, coating us on our cots. My teeth grate against sand. The child in the next room wails. Too hot to sleep, I imagine the past. The house in California, the land my parents were not allowed to own. They truck farmed strawberries, lettuce, celery, tomatoes, and cauliflower. After Japanese language school, my brothers and sisters and I joined them in the fields. My sister and I plowed, one holding the reins, the other holding the plow. Rainy evenings, I played piano. My mother was always singing. I remember oshogatsu, the men pounding rice, the women shaping mochi. Perhaps that year, 1941, someone forgot. Perhaps someone swept. Ministers and teachers disappeared. Police shone spotlights through our kitchen window. Radios and cameras were confiscated. On telephone poles, notices appeared announcing the evacuation. We could only take what we could carry with 2 hands. We sold the tractor and the car, the furniture and piano for a pittance. Our old horse that used to pull the plow was destroyed. The bus took us to Tanfren. We slept on hay in a horse stall heaped with manure. For 3 months, we were incarcerated behind barbed wire. Then soldiers holding guns took us by train to this concentration camp. Don't go near the fence, the guards yell. Mr. Wakasa walked too close. He died, shot in the chest. The wind shrieks. I pull on my boots and tiptoe past my sleeping family. At the toilets, a young mother stands in line with her daughter. The girl clutches her doll, a Daruma with one eye. This eye is the girl's wish, our wish. How long must we wait before she can draw the second eye? Because we have at least 3 music teachers listening in, I chose Where Sovereign Music Leads, an Italian sonnet in the voice of Barbara Strozzi. She lived in Venice in the 17th century and published 7 collections of songs that she had written. She was very well known and had great renown as a singer, composer, and instrumentalist. And I had never heard of her, and maybe you haven't either. So I want to give her some of her due. Where sovereign music leads to hill or vale, in spirited delights that toss the heart and join the souls of lovers, soon to part, or chambers of a king, with marble pale in graceful, wending dance that stills the gale of duty for an hour, holding court. There must I follow in melodic art, composing music, noble patrons hail. But know my name will fade from lips and pen, for men disdain my sex and only see the fairest face and form as currency. Despite the joy my songs engender when their notes reveal my rare ability, fame grants sweet immortality to men. The last poem I'll read from Fierce Light is Barnstorming. And now that Bessie Coleman is on one of our commemorative quarters, you may be a little bit familiar with her, but she was the first African-American to earn an international pilot's license. She lived from 1892 to 1926. Barnstorming. I'm one of 13 born to Texas sharecroppers. Papa left when I was 3. I walked 4 miles to get to school, dust puffs rising from my feet. And on that dust, I vowed to amount to something. I followed my brother to Chicago and worked as a manicurist in the White Sox barbershop, where the pilots who had flown in the Great War told their tales of dogfights and reconnaissance, Fokkers popping from clouds, dictavolca maneuvers, scarves of smoke, spinning dives and pulling up at the last second. I knew then what I would be, but no one would teach me, a woman who's colored. I had to learn French and travel to Paris to earn my pilot's license. I'll never forget the crash that killed Pierre, the terrible shock of carnage, scattered flesh that used to speak and kiss. That same day, I willed myself to mount a plane and fly. When I crashed last year, I thought of Pierre, but I only broke 1 leg and a couple of ribs. They've kept us down so long. It's only right my people learn to fly. I aim to start a school teaching aviation to colored men and women. Money comes from barnstorming. Queen Bess, they call me. Thousands pay to watch me strut, all suited up in leather, climb into the Jenny, rumble down the runway, and lift up into blue, the prop a busy blur and the engine throbbing. Hammerheads rolls and loops, spins and lines, skimming the crowd, all screaming and ducking and clutching their heads. I laugh and ascend, wrapped in the sky, leaning over the cockpit sill, the land below patched green and brown, and the crowd looking up, waving their tiny hats. This next poem appeared just last week in Panoply Zine, and I had so much fun researching these women's lives that I can't stop. So I'm working on another manuscript, this time not in first person. And this is one of the first poems I wrote for that collection that is in the process of forming itself. This is Clara Schumann. Past the Denkmal where our lords' nailed arms point to and from Leipzig, where the cobblestones start in the shadow of the oldest linden and lead to the caverns of business. How Wieck teaches theory and voice, piano and violin. Instruments glisten for sale or rent, and wooden stretchers for reluctant fingers beckon to housefraus and their merchant husbands. How Wieck marries, and his wife gives piano lessons while their child Clara sits on the braided rug, absorbing the notes, blood beating time to the music. How Wieck shouts and grips his wife's arm, hissing, Ertrieb, immer Ertrieb. But the child pays no mind, eyes locked on the knot in the wall, fingers tracing the braids. In Berlin, remarried with a second family, her mother dreams Clara walks into the Rhine. Mud sucks the shoes from her daughter's feet, and sharp rocks shred flesh, trailing a path followed by fish. Clara seeks the rings Robert flung into the river, the one she gave him when they became engaged, a secret from her father, and the wedding ring following Robert's mind into darkness. Face down, arms extended, Clara drifts above the riverbed, fingers tracing the stones. Arpeggio. A local theater group, Prospect, asked if I might write a poem for one of the characters in a play. She gave up her love and was working a dead-end job and staring out the window, watching him climb on the bus. And one day, instead of watching him through the glass, she saw her own reflection, which catapulted her into a very life-changing decision, and she became an English professor. So I was asked to write a poem that she might have written that went into her collection of poetry. And I thought, well, she's an English professor, I will write a sonnet. So this is If Glass Had Not Held Light. If glass had not held light when I was lost in longing for a lovely summer fled to autumn's rust and wrack, to brittle frost enshrouding favors flowers, faded, dead except in dreams that haunted listless rote with shades of gaunt regret that flaunt the past as perfect. Grief would then have had my throat in collar kept, its captive to the last. But glass transformed by light reflects the gaze, and by that light I found within my face the favor due myself and all my days. Epiphanized, my life has mirrored grace as given in that glance, and liberty fluoresces in this lucent destiny. The remaining poems I'll read from my book that came out in June of 2022, Wind and Children, from Main Street Rag. This is largely a retrospective on my 36 years as a public elementary school teacher, with other poems that sort of chart the course of teaching and learning from students, from the community I served, from life. I'm going to start with harvest, and this was inspired as I drove to work, passing the fields and seeing the migrant workers. And, shortly after I began my teaching, I realized that these were very probably the families of my students. Harvest. They arrive in the fog before dawn in unmarked yellow buses and stuttering sedans filled beyond capacity. Men and women with dark hair beneath tight-fitting caps huddle around the fire at the edge of the fields. The heavy sky is a shawl of poison, and they work wrapped in its embrace, nurturing the wealth of their conquerors. Bent over the earth, the home they care for but do not own. Icy fingers and aching arms reach and gather the harvest, while their dreams ride their backs like children on horses. The leaves whisper ancient stories, the benediction of family, and the seasons of birth and childhood, work and death. Beneath their toil, the earth smells sweet, like sheets washed in the river and dried in the sun. The bed that waits, already made, for those who gaze at it every day and those who look away. Weathered, for Dennis. Wind and children, wet paint, a flight of birds. Hills ferry the dead to the sea. In my dream, I leaned against your back. Now I lean against stone. Granite, I believe. Mica, feldspar, and quartz. Prime numbers, justice, snakes. You swerved for some reason we will never know, becoming a rocket without mice, the perfect ellipse, an arrow. The clouds arrange themselves, a chorus against a blue drop. Yellow chrysanthemums nod. A family of 10 sits around a grave, as if at table giving thanks. This is how. In the center of the diner, a woman in a hijab sat writing while her little boy dropped a ball which rolled this way and that. He trotted after it, bent to retrieve the ball, returned to his mother, dropped and retrieved, returned and dropped. A white-haired man with a paper cup in his hand shuffled to the center from the opposite side. He stopped behind the boy's mother, lifted his cup, and dumped it over the seated woman's head. Ice slid down her hijab and skittered over the floor. He yelled, "Get that brat out of here and go back to wherever you came from." The woman jumped up and shouted, "You bad man, my son did nothing wrong." The boy cried, and my daughter hid under our table. I sat in shocked silence. I sat and did nothing. I said nothing, nothing. I sat in silence and did nothing. The manager ran over and yelled at the man, told him to get out and never come back. The manager apologized to the woman and gave her a package of terry cloth towels so she could wipe the soda from her hijab. I wanted to apologize to the woman. I wanted to tell her she is welcome here. I wanted to tell her I thought her son was very well behaved, but I was afraid and said nothing. 20 years later, one of my students asks how the Holocaust could have happened. I tell them about the woman in the hijab and her son, the old man and the manager, and how I watched and did nothing, walked past her and said nothing. This is how. New Year's Day. Curlews swoop and roll on a sky of burnished steel, twirling in the wind, which tosses limbs and beckons. Tumbleweeds converge bald against the bank or nestled in a ditch awaiting sun. The flock passed again yesterday, headed down the road, the dogs guiding them soundlessly, the shepherds bundled in caps and carrying poles. One dog limped, right front paw raised. The flock moved on, and the dog left its post beside my driveway. Now the sheep are quartered 2 fields away, and in the morning their calls blend with the roosters. Wind, when you stop stripping shingles and toppling barns, speak to me, teach me to fly. Thank you. Look back in wonder. It was the best thing I could have done. For 36 years, their lives subsumed mine, their future my cause, their hunger folded around metal desks salted with pencils and visited by cockroaches, while outside the windows, almonds bloomed. It was the look in their eyes, listening or challenging, open or hurt. The room filled with tipped up faces of various shapes and hues. I knew their walk from 50 feet, their unique penmanship, their voices even with my back turned. It was all I could do to stop myself from thinking about them long after the last stories were corrected, assignments graded, tests created, an outline for their research reports typed in preparation for the ditto machine at dawn. It was my art and atonement, my debt to the world repaid in service and hope. For every note placed on my desk, for every poem shared, for every smile of comprehension, I was doubly blessed, for I was their teacher, and this my joy. I'm going to finish with a poem that encapsulates the absolutely best field trip ever. And those of you living on the coast are probably familiar with perhaps this site, but especially for children who had never left the valley, who had never seen the ocean, even if it was only 100 miles away. This was just the most magical experience, and I'm so glad I was able to share it with them. Monterey. Dolphins, the captain said, straight ahead. But all I saw were specks on the colorless horizon. No, there, called someone, pointing to the right. 7 dolphins skipping on the surface hurtled toward us, leaping up and arcing down. They dove under the boat, then rose alongside, skimming through waves, up for air and straight for speed, racing us, darting beneath the boat and up again, leaping in tandem and flying in the rolling swells. Water and air, silver sky, silver skin. They swam with us to greet scores of teeming, streamlined kin, flashing fins and dipping flukes. And when we left the swirling pod, 2 swam a while beside the boat, as if the world were new again, and childhood friends might kindly go with us a little of the way home. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Linda, for sharing your joy. I'm going to suggest that folks unmute and give voice and give applause. Let's make noise too.
Wonderful, Linda.
Beautiful, so beautiful.
Oh, thank you, everyone. You're such a
So
lovely
moving,
audience.
Linda. So moving.
Thank you.
You really have a wonderful way with persona poems. They're so special, and they just ring very true for me.
I'll say something, Linda. I think that poem that you wrote about saying nothing was a masterpiece. Okay, I mean, truly unbelievable piece. Really, so moving, and so
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it said so well.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
It was a hard poem to write. I mean, it was an unforgettable experience, and I wasn't sure what I was going to write. All my grandparents came from Germany, and this has always been something that's troubled me terribly, and it just fell together as I was writing it. So,
well, all I could say is mine as well, except that they came a little earlier before it came in the 1800s on my mom's side. Yes, so but certainly no.
Thank you again.
I was inspired by your research and your dedication to the women that went before us. That was really beautiful.
Well, I was so troubled when I looked at the social studies book, even the most complete sixth grade social studies book. You'd look in the index, and there were a few women, and they were mostly the wives, of a man. And so it just felt like this was something I had to do. And it really has been a joy.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Linda, I really enjoyed the narrative effects of your work. You bring us to an experience, and we see what it's going to be, and we feel it. And with your words and beautifully spoken, I'm thinking of the Monterey poem there at the end with the dolphins. And then you bring us to some sort of a universality, some sort of a feeling that we've all felt in our lives, maybe 60 years ago, but still we felt it. And I want to thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. It means so much to me that actually two of my friends who I met 60 years ago are in this audience.
Oh, that's
Sheila and Peter.
Hi, Pete.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Wonderful. Oh. Wow.
That was some reading. Some reading. Wow.
So are you a retired teacher then? You're still teaching with your work. Your poems, like, boy, some of those went right into me, and like, that's something I'm going to remember and think about. And what a gift.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I retired 5 years ago, and it was hard at first. Oh, I felt so worthless. But I
still
got
doing
over
the
that.
work.
Yes, and I'm doing a lot of volunteering, and I do tutor one adult, but it is so delightful now to have the time to write poetry and submit and edit and take walks with the dogs. And I feel very fortunate indeed.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for sharing. It's so hard for me often. We quote lines in the chat, but there's such a totality to each of the pieces that it's hard to be listening for that line that just grabs you, because so many of them do, and they do it because they all belong together. And so I really wanted to thank you for that. It was a very moving reading.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful.
Yes.
Linda, I just wanted to say something. After first few lines, opening lines, in practically every poem that you have read, there is so much emotional honesty that comes through. You do it with such courage that one can't help but being moved, and more than that, reflect on events in our own lives that perhaps are relevant and sound similar. So I really thank you for this. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Gosh, I swear this is the loveliest poetry reading I've ever given, and you are the most beautiful audience. I'm so humbled and honored.
We're just basking. So, well, unless someone else would like to speak.
It was so good to see you, Linda. I'm so glad you invited me to participate in my first poetry reading. This is the first one I've ever attended, and it was beautiful.
Wow.
I have to applaud you for that.
Wow.
Wow, I'll second that one hugely.
Hey, yes, absolutely. Well, we hope you'll come back.
Yeah.
As habits go, it's a pretty healthy one.
It is a healthy habit. Yes, yes.
Very relaxing to just sit here and listen and absorb the feeling that you put into every poem. It was just so moving, and I'm so proud of you.
Oh, gosh, thanks.
And be carried along too by the words. I mean, so many to me, so many poems are like boats. Here I am. I get in this boat and I ride in this boat wherever it takes me, and that's kind of a.
Just one more comment. All the poems have a real modesty and a quiet demeanor, but they speak volumes. There's like a really quiet strength, some sort of a paradox that's very compelling.
Oh,
Notice
thank you.
Okay, well, thanks.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Steffi here. I just wanted to share. Yes, my first time here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I liked the poem about the Mexican woman, about like cultural aspect, or there was also one where she said that she had to learn how to speak French, or I forget the other one, but that's what stood out to me because I speak French, and my English teacher taught me how to speak English like really well, and that's why I'm here.
Glad you
Wonderful. So glad you could come
you.
and join us, Steffi, and hope you'll come back again.
Yeah.
So, thank you again, Linda. We're going to stop recording in a moment. Those of you in the Zoom room, please stay online if you'd like to take part in the open mic. And thanks to all our YouTube listeners. Please tune in for our next regular Coastside Poetry event on Tuesday, February 14th, when we'll welcome San Francisco poet and host of Sacred Grounds reading series, Dan Brady. So thanks so much for joining us at Coastside Poetry and for helping to keep the lamps of poetry burning.
That's good. Keep the